I'm going to ask you a question, and there's no wrong answer here. Who do you think is the worst owner in NFL history? I can hear the arguments for George Preston Marshall, especially with his reluctance to integrate. More recently, Dan Snyder, whom most of us would like to refer to as a sniveling rat. Perhaps you're more resigned to hating the likes of Mike Brown and his iron grip on the Bengals, or Jimmy Haslam's corruption with the Browns. Or you're more into the regional bias with the likes of Art Modell, Ken Behring, Bob Irsay, Bud Adams, or Stan Kroenke. But I implore you to look past these examples. Dig deeper into the heart of the matter and you will find a perfect storm of terrible. A man who exemplifies the worst traits of sports ownership. Insanely cheap, treacherously backstabbing, incompetent in on-field matters, yet incredibly invested in making money at the expense of the product. You will find Hugh Culverhouse. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers of the early days, I call him another term. The worst owner in NFL history. But before we begin with the reign of error, I want to take a moment to talk about the sponsor of this video, Keeps. It's an unfortunate horror that 2 out of 3 men will experience before the age of 35. Male pattern baldness. Or at least some form of it. As wiser men than me have said, the best defense is a good offense. And what way to prevent baldness than by doing just that? Keeps offers clinically proven and heavily researched treatments to stop hair loss in its tracks. The best thing about it is that you can get expert care without stepping foot in a doctor's office or pharmacy. All treatments are doctor recommended and delivered right to you at roughly half the cost of traditional methods. And Keeps has a network of clinically licensed medical advisors, prescribers, and care specialists to aid you in the battles against hair loss. If you have any questions to ask during your journey, each plan comes with a year of unlimited messaging. So feel free to fire away. Hair loss doesn't have to be fate. You can get 50% off your order by going to keeps.com/utree or clicking the link in the description. That's keeps.com/utree. With Keeps, hair loss can not only be stopped, it can be stress-free as well. Now on to the main video. 1976. The bicentennial of these fine United States of America, and the hatching of teams from the NFL's egg. Looking at the blue skies of Tampa, Florida, the Buccaneers are blinded by this world and the vast majesty that it encompasses. The unfortunate problem for this fledgling franchise is that its parents were colossal assholes. They lifted table scraps and sawdust to choose from. Their expansion draft was legendary for how awful it was. Teams were able to protect 30 players in their 42-man rosters, and protect another player after one was lost, and teams could only lose a maximum of 3 players. They had to fight Seattle for these gnawed bones. But that wouldn't be the biggest punishment Tampa would suffer. That would be their new owner in Hugh Culverhouse, a former tax attorney for the IRS who built himself to wealth in Jacksonville. He nearly bought the Rams from Dan Reeves' estate in 1971, but got undercut by Carroll Rosenblum and Bob Irsay in a switcheroo. Culverhouse sued the NFL and got a chance to potentially own an expansion franchise, after the first suitor was caught up in a messy divorce. At first glance, Culverhouse seems okay enough, but he had a fatal flaw that ruined the Bucs. He was a skinflint. His cheapness with everything surrounding him infected the team to his offices to his own clothing. He cared not for the scoreline, the stat line, or the goal line. He was only interested in the bottom line. If he were forced to pay a fee to rescue himself from a dungeon, he'd have allowed himself to rot. Anything to save a penny. Tampa Bay's inaugural season in 1976 was hilariously awful. 141 players went through, but they had no offense. Their main defensive scheme was Leroy Selman. They couldn't block real good, but made up for it by not tackling. The only punch they offered was on Johnny Carson. When John McKay was asked about his team's execution, he was in favor of it. Now, going 0-14 in some of the ugliest football the league has seen in decades is one thing, but what made it sting harder was the cheapskate known as Culverhouse. Their team's practice facilities were right next to the airport without a proper weight room. He had the walls painted white so he didn't have to pay for projector screens. He requested their first office building pay for team letterhead. A front office assistant for the Bucs qualified for welfare. He charged players for things like cans of Coke, phone calls made at a hotel, and jerseys that were ripped to alleviate an injury. The team plane was a rattletrap leased from a group that specialized in chainsaws. McCullough Company was doing so well that Culverhouse had to pay for fuel out of his own pockets sometimes. He didn't like that, but he did like it when the Bucs finally won a game against the New Orleans Saints at the Superdome. 27 games into their existence. The whole damn team and city celebrated as if they had won the Super Bowl. New Orleans honored their defeat by firing Hank Stram into the Gulf of Mexico near simultaneously. And even worse, the Bucs would end up winning another game before the end of the 1977 season. Pants were instantly shat. The good times for the rest of us were over. After being the butt of everyone's joke, Tampa Bay developed from a rather forgettable 5-11 outfit in 1978 to one of the surprise upstarts in 1979. Thanks to an elite defense led by Leroy Selman and a young quarterback from Grambling State named Doug Williams. When they made the NFC Championship game that year, endless pants were shat. A team this good this early? There had to be a catch. And there was. And it wasn't losing to the Rams in the championship game. It also wasn't Hugh Culverhouse being the head trustee to the Rams' estate. Keep going. It's that Culverhouse was cheap, and his cheapness prevented him from hiring a true general manager. Therefore, the head coach would get complete autonomy over the roster and personnel decisions. If it's someone who's allegedly a lifetime coach like John McKay, I guess it could be stomached, but not when they throw out future first-round picks like they're candy. Consider 1979's first-rounder. Traded to the Bears for a Wally Chambers with a bum knee and would be gone in 2 years. That pick became the 4th selection, and was converted into 5-time All-Pro Dan Hampton. Normally, this would be the end of such pain, but not for Tampa. Take the disaster that was the 1982 draft. Hugh Culverhouse had sent his equipment manager to New York as the team's representative. The choices were between Sean Farrell, a guard out of Penn State, and Booker Reese, a defensive end out of Bethune-Cookman. After some deliberation, the Bucs war room chose the physical specimen of Reese. Only problem was that the phone reception was garbage. Thanks to that and a shitload of noise in the room, the rep mishears and hands in the card for Farrell. The war room prolapses. Hugh Culverhouse had a conniption. Tampa Bay tried to plead with Roselle to undo the pick, but no backsies. This is when the Bucs did what we call a pro-gamer move. Booker Reese was still available in the second round, yet Tampa didn't have their second rounder. So why not trade next year's first to pick Reese? It worked out perfectly. If you consider Reese becoming a massive bust who was traded for a 12th round pick 3 years later is perfect. I hate to inform you, but the 1983 draft was very deep. And while their selection only became Willie Gault, it could have been used to pick Dan Marino, Ken O'Brien, or used to trade up to pick Jim Kelly. So why did I mention quarterbacks? Because it was the final year of Doug Williams' contract. He was only the best player on the team not named Leroy Selman. A consistent leader, clutch player, and great offensive catalyst for the era. The main problem was that he wasn't getting paid like it. Doug was making less than every other starter in the league, and half of the NFL's backups. Culverhouse was considered to be a likable owner before this point due to making the playoffs 3 times in 4 years, but here is where he begins to sabotage the team. Williams asked for a $600,000 salary to make him one of the higher-paid QBs in the league. Hugh set his offer at $400,000. And wouldn't budge for anything. John McKay begged Hugh to side with his quarterback, but Hugh had other ideas. Say, Doug, instead of giving you money, why not invest it in Tampa Sphere? It's only the greatest real estate opportunity in history. For a $200,000 loan, he'd get a 2% share of the action. That's right, a loan for a concept that wasn't even being constructed yet. If you try to look for it, good luck. The area was supposed to be in is now a Walmart. The holdout would be long in the tooth, and Hugh ordered another glorious move in trading a first-round pick to Cincinnati for the throw-in Samoan known as Jack Thompson. Hugh was trying to put the squeeze on Doug, but he didn't take something into consideration. The USFL. Williams saw it as an opportunity to escape, and he did so. He may have gotten fucked in Tampa Bay, but he would get his revenge. He'd eventually be reunited with Joe Gibbs in Washington, lead the Redskins to a Super Bowl win in 1988, becoming the game's MVP in the process. So Washington, if you ever wanted to thank someone for extending your proud tradition, thank Hugh Culverhouse. The Bucs, without the QB that led them to glory, completely fell apart in 1983. Do you want to know how bad it gets? Fans were openly cheering their opponents when the Bucs lost. After Williams left, they would accrue at least 10 losses a season for the next decade plus. Even worse, remember that they traded their first-rounder this year for Jack Thompson. He was nowhere near Williams' caliber, outright ineffective and cut in 2 seasons. For this failed power play maneuver, the Bucs traded the first overall pick. It was a weak draft, but they still could have gotten Irving Fryer or Carl Banks with it. The good news with all of this losing is that they didn't have to give away many game balls. Good for the players, as they wouldn't be billed by the team for them. Saves them enough money to run to Wendy's for lunch during practice. Quarterback problems would continue on and on. Culverhouse tried to offer the same damn Tampa Ponzi sphere stake to Warren Moon, but he wisely said no. After Jack Thompson failed, it was a second-round pick for Steve DeBerg. He was to assist a supplemental first-rounder in Steve Young, who was both a poor fit for the scheme Tampa was running and had nothing around him. In another case of completely mismanaging elite talent and nearly ruining him by exiling him to Cardinal Hell, Young was traded to San Francisco for a second and a fourth-round pick. So just in case you wanted to thank somebody for the Young Montana controversy, you can point right to Hugh Culverhouse. Remember that coaches had roster autonomy. Ray Perkins wanted Heisman winner Vinny Testaverde as his QB, which burned another first overall pick. To properly describe his early years in Tampa, he was awful. Just awful. The terrible team around him shattered his confidence and destroyed any semblance of development he may have had. After years of frustratingly slow progress, the Bucs did another goddamn pro-gamer move by trading a first-round pick in 1992 to the Colts for Chris Chandler. If they thought Testaverde was bad, Chandler was even worse than that. Spent more time bickering to the press before being waived a year and a half into his tenure. For the price of Chris Chan, Tampa ended up surrendering the second overall pick in the draft. It was used to pick Quentin Coryatt, who didn't become much, but it could have been used for Sean Gilbert, Terrell Buckley, Troy Vincent, or Bob Whitfield. The guy who replaced him off the bench? Vinny goddamn Testaverde. He'd be free from this hell by 1993. But none of that chaos holds a candle to what happened to Bo Jackson. In 1986, the legendary Auburn running back was in the middle of a stellar baseball season for the school. But Tampa had their eyes set on him. They wanted to bring him in for a physical and tour of the facilities. Everything paid for by the team, including flight, hotel, meals, the works. There's nothing to worry about, Bo. The Bucs cleared it with the NCAA and SEC. It's perfectly legal. The problem was that it wasn't. The trip violated his amateur standing in the SEC, and he was stripped of eligibility from the baseball team in the middle of the season. It doesn't matter what the Bucs did, Bo believed it was a conspiracy to keep him away from baseball. He told Culverhouse and the team, "Do not draft me. I will never come to Tampa Bay. You'll be wasting your pick if you do." Come the day of the 1986 draft, do you know what these fuckers do with the first pick? They take Bo Jackson. Culverhouse believed that Bo would forgive them for their power play with what he called the biggest offer in NFL history. Yet for some reason he kept trying to plug real estate deals to him. He offered him a stake in undeveloped land in Sarasota. It was both hubris and underestimating Jackson's resolve. He had an out, and it was baseball. He turned down the Bucs to play for the Kansas City Royals for much less money. A year later, he not only got drafted by the Raiders, but was allowed to play baseball as well. So if you ever wondered about the start of the two-sport legend of Bo Jackson, look no further than Culverhouse. After this, you vowed to never draft another baseball player again, which nearly cost them John Lynch in 1993. It doesn't end there either. Hugh had a huge role in NFL labor negotiations due to his past as an accountant. Every move he made was made for one reason: to fuck over players. In 1982, he pulled every dirty card in the book to get a better deal. Don't forget 1987, the replacement players fiasco. Culverhouse was the main one banging the table for them. He'd pay money to other owners to pay off debts while securing sweetheart rates on loans due to his income from the team. The owners praised his negotiating savvy, use of technology, and financial skills, but he was insanely secretive with his tactics. Financial statements never included a cash flow or how much they were paying key figures in the league hierarchy. It all adds up because Hugh cried poor. He played that fiddle so long he threatened to play 3 games a year at the Citrus Bowl in Orlando and entertained an offer to move the Bucs to Sacramento in the late 80s. All the while, accounting reports revealed that Hugh's not only lying, he's one of the most profitable owners in the league. Not to mention he might have been taking a salary like a few other owners did at the time. It's all because he wouldn't pay players and he gave away top draft picks like they were nothing. Strangely enough, he paid top dollars for head coaches. He paid a rich sum to lure John McKay from USC, giving him a lifetime contract even when every fan in existence wanted him fired. Thanks to health issues and frustrations with the organization's penny pinching, he retired in 1984. After that came Lehman Bennett, who was only good for cronyism and creating a culture so apathetic and undisciplined it was known as Buccaneer Beach. After him came Ray Perkins from Alabama. His authoritarian hand did little more than eventually alienate the locker room. Hugh then wanted to pry Bill Walsh out of the broadcast booth, but he rejected them because he didn't want to pay extra for a head coach he wanted. So they pumped the ball to next year by keeping the placeholder known as Richard Williamson around. He didn't work out too well. That offseason, a huge hoopla was made about Bill Parcells. Hugh had stated an agreement was made between them, with him getting complete control of operations, even though Tuna said no such thing. After considering the offer, Bill turned them down, which led Culverhouse to say he felt like he'd been jilted at the altar. After After another lengthy coaching search, this led to Sam White of Bengals fame. He unsurprisingly did not work out either. Culverhouse's reign of error would eventually end in the mid-90s. Lung cancer was detected in 1992 and slowly weakened him and his grip on the team. After treatment to stop the cancer failed, he succumbed to death in August of 1994. With all of this in mind, you can make a strong argument for Hugh Culverhouse being the worst owner in NFL history. His teams weren't only mostly terrible, but they were handicapped by frugality that hasn't been seen this side of Scrooge McDuck. Worst of all, he had significant influence in league affairs. So while he helped to make the league more profitable and efficient, it mostly came at the expense of players and fans. And in some cases, his non-playing employees by cutting health insurance benefits. It's even stranger since Culverhouse donated significant chunks of money to several universities, the performing arts, Habitat for Humanity, and the United Way. I wouldn't feel that badly for him, though. After his death, it was quickly revealed that Hugh wasn't only worth more than he was letting on, he had a string of mistresses and extramarital affairs spanning decades. He was shagging waitresses when he was supposedly hard at work, and his wife didn't know about it. Culverhouse and his trust tried to fuck his own family in the wool by means of deception. It led to years of bitter lawsuits. And when it was all over, his widow Joy stated, quote, "I'd like to pull him out of the grave and shoot him with every bullet I could get." He wasn't just a piece of shit to his teams. He was one to his family as well. After he died, let's just say things got better for the Buccaneers. The Glazers are far from the best owners in sports, but compared to Culverhouse, they're the NFL's version of Jeff Vinnick. Once the trust sold, Tampa Bay would enjoy some semblance of success, albeit with another long stretch of seemingly endless futility. Even then, they do have 2 Super Bowl trophies in their arsenal, and have become even more profitable than Hugh Culverhouse could have even dreamed of. But before you think of what the Bucs are now, remember what they've come from. Remember the reign of error. So we'll probably have us Tom Brady's coming back for another year of football. Fuck.
And I think that's what all the Buccaneer players and coaches and fans and everyone, you have to remember this all your life.
That's tipped, and that's a 5th pick of the game by Dwight Smith. And again, Dwight Smith is going to take it down the sideline into the end zone. Wow.